Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul. Hopefully you're having an amazing day. I want to kick this video off discussing the RTX 4090, 4080 and 4070, aka Lovelace. So these GPUs will launch Q3, Q4. There's a bit of conflicting information regarding the actual release date for Lovelace. And this will, of course, face off against AMD's RDNA 3 series of graphics cards. And it's going to be a very interesting fight for many reasons. We'll get more into that in just a moment. But mydrivers.com have a very interesting article up concerning not just the fact that those are the three SKUs which are going to launch first, although honestly this does match up with what Nvidia have done several times in the past, launching, the top 3 SKUs in there, or at least the top 2 SKUs, and then starting to fill out the lower ranks later on. But we also have some information concerning the prices. And prices, of course, are a very sensitive topic at the moment. They've been absolutely screwed, let's just be honest, over the past year or so, in terms of MSRP just not being adhered to, and it's just a mess, basically. So yeah, according to this article, we're going to be seeing the prices increase about 10% over the previous SKU. So for example, the 4070 is going to be about 10% more expensive than the 3070, and so on and so on. And if you've watched one of my previous videos, it wasn't up on the channel too long ago, I think it was some point last week, I had already said that one of my sources had told me that yes, the RTX 40 series will be more expensive, but it's not going to be incredibly more expensive than the RTX 30 series. I was hearing that the flagship card was going to cost around $1,600, possibly $1,700. There was an outlier, there was a small possibility that it could go up to $1,800, but apparently the target was around $1,600 to $1,700 US. Meanwhile, AMD's cards were actually more expensive, and this is because they basically have the performance advantage. It's going to be about 3 times faster than the 6900 XT for the Nave 31 flagship SKU, and meanwhile, Nvidia are going to be sitting around 2.4 times faster compared to the 3090, which is the current flagship. So obviously AMD, especially given they are going to be using MCM dies and all of that jazz, they feel that they can charge a premium. I was actually told by yet another individual that you can kind of think of this card, in fact AMD somewhat are thinking of this card as like, you know how we've had Titan cards, right? You had the Titan X and all of this stuff with Maxwell, Pascal and so on and so on, and there are different versions of them, but they're basically premium products. Well, I was told that the highest end SKU from AMD is going to be kind of like the Titan of Titan cards. It's going to be like an entire new echelon of performance. That's how AMD are going to try to market this thing to you anyway, but it's going to be really expensive. So yeah, right, honestly, this information from the website plus my information, I'm relatively sure that we're not going to see Nvidia break the $2,000 mark. I'm hearing that they're going to want to make them as cheap relatively anyway as possible, because obviously Nvidia, in terms of raster performance anyway, are probably not going to have the lead on AMD. It's going to be vice versa. The thing is though, to my understanding, and I put out a recent DLSS 3 video, talking about this more extensively, I'll try to remember to link it in the description. I think Nvidia are going to really want to change how we perceive performance numbers, and I think that they're probably going to want you to think of like, oh, okay, well it's raster performance, but the next generation of games, that almost all are going to have ray tracing. And let's face it, they're not actually incorrect about that. Like, a lot of games now, they have ray tracing enabled. And obviously consoles are a large part of that. So it's going to be very interesting to me what the messaging is going to be around these cards. At the end of the day, they're not out yet. And I suspect that when reviewers get hold of these things, it's going to be a very interesting time for everyone. I think that upsampling technology is also going to be so important, but even outside of upsampling tech, like, damn, these cards are going to be ridiculous. Let's say it's 2.4, 2.5 times faster for the 4090. Dude. Just, look at the frame rates you get in a 3080 or a 3090 or a 6900 XT or whatever, and it's 2.5 times that. So, I mean, many games now are getting 80, 90 frames a second at 4K, depending whether you've got ray tracing enabled and all that stuff. Resident Evil Village does really well. So, I mean, conceivably, some of these current titles, which are running at like 60 or 80 frames a second, or even higher, with like all the effects on, you know, bells and whistles on, you could be hitting like, well, performance doesn't necessarily scale linearly, of course, but it's not impossible that we're looking at like 160 or even 200 frames a second for these games. Like, damn. So you can imagine what would happen if you were running something like DLSS. Obviously, future titles will also be more demanding, and there are certainly ways that developers can crank up the requirements of like ray tracing pretty easily. So it's going to be very interesting to me as well what the memory allotment for these GPUs is going to be. I suspect Nvidia will not launch a card like the 3080 again, which has only got 10 gigabytes of RAM. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think they will. I think they're going to be a lot more generous with VRAM capacities. Speaking of VRAM, there is also another kind of Nvidia-related story. This is going to be a very Nvidia-related video. The 3090 Ti. So I'm sure most of you people are aware at this point that the 3090 has 24 gigabytes of RAM. It's currently the highest end SKU for Nvidia. But, you know, generally, if prices of cards were normal, you probably wouldn't want to go for it. Most folks would probably want to instead go for the 3080 Ti or the 3080, but just because of how prices are at the moment, sometimes even the 3090 is cheaper than the 3080, which is just... I don't even know what to tell you on that one. But, yeah, we've been hearing a lot of rumours concerning the 3090 Ti and Unico's hardware. I'll leave a link, of course, in the video description, as stated according to their sources. They've had a reasonable track record in the past, but of course any information can be wrong. But, yeah, basically, it's apparently going to be running at 21 Gbps, which means we're over 1,000 gigabytes per second of bandwidth, which I kind of think is just absolutely ridiculous. As for the rest of the specs for this thing, I mean, I won't go into the whole, you know, performance comparison because I'll be here until Christmas. Next year, that is, not this year, because, you know, this year it's less than a month away, which is kind of scaring me. But basically, we're looking at 10,752 CUDA cores. So that's basically 500 additional CUDA cores over the 3080 Ti. So it's not huge numbers, you know, it's not a huge increase. RT cores 84 versus 82 and 80 of the 3090 and 3080 Ti respectively. The memory bandwidth though, that's really the differentiating factor between the 3090 Ti and 3090, at least in my opinion. 936 gigabytes per second, which is not exactly slow, and this is 1008 gigabytes per second. So obviously the rest of the specifications, such as the memory bus, they remain identical. It's not clear yet what the clock frequency is for this GPU in terms of its core clock, that type of thing. I've personally been hearing it might be a little faster in terms of its clock frequency, and this is one of the reasons that we could be seeing this card nudge to 450 watt TDP. 250 would be amazing. Yeah, 450 watt TDP, which is about 100 watts higher than the current flagships, depending on which one you're referring to from Nvidia. So that's kind of ridiculous. Like, yeah, I'd be interested to see what that does to a small form factor build. I'd also be curious to see what the cooler looks like, because we still haven't seen that. I wonder if it's going to be like the 3090 cooler or whatever, albeit with a few tweaks, or whether it's going to be a totally different design. I don't think it'll be a totally different design. That's not a leak, that's just me guessing. So just a quick thing regarding the RTX 2060 12GB card. This is courtesy of videocards.com. I'm going to go over this very briefly. But yeah, basically, this is going to be a new release for Nvidia, and it's going to be released early this month, at least according to the rumors. So this card, the best way of describing the 12GB GPU is to basically imagine a hybrid of the 2060 Super and the 2060 6GB. So according to videocards.com, it's got 12GB of memory. You probably guessed that by now, the fact I've said 12GB so many times. The memory bus, therefore, is only 192-bit, which is the same as the launch 2060 6GB, but it's slimmer than the 2060 Super, which was 256. The memory frequency, though, is identical, so it still has the same amount of memory bandwidth, only 336GB. So it is actually, well, yeah, it's basically going to have the same bandwidth as the 2060 6GB, but a lot less memory bandwidth than the 448 of the 2060 Super. The brilliant part about this, though, is that the TDP is higher. So the 2060 6GB is 160 watts. There's so many sixes here. And then finally, the 2060 Super, that's 175 watts, whereas this card is 184. So it's not exactly going to break the wall out there or anything like that with, you know, 9-ish watts more power consumption. So it's going to be very interesting. Apparently the clock frequency on the core is higher. I'll be interested to see what it's possible to overclock the memory to, because, I mean, yeah. I actually don't remember the benchmarks for the 2060 Super offhand. I think I even reviewed one back in the day. But I don't remember how memory bandwidth starved or not starved it is. So it'll be interesting to see what actually comes of that in terms of, you know, the pure luck of being able to overclock it. I do wonder if one of the reasons they've gone with this is possibly to make it less appealing to mining, because I believe Ethereum is very bandwidth dependent, but again, I haven't actually checked on the video, it just popped in my head, so I don't know what the performance numbers are of the Ethereum mining of the 2060 versus the 2060 Super, so I might be wrong on that. Either way, it will be very interesting to see what happens with this card. It is, of course, going to still be faster than the 3050, which is another card that Nvidia are going to launch. Honestly, I'm okay with them launching the 2060 for the lower end market. You know, it's absolutely fine. It's not like it doesn't have like ray tracing or anything like that. It's just obviously it's not as fast as something like the 3060 Ti or, you know, another card. So I'm all for it, as long as it gives us more choice in the market. We'll be curious to see what availability is like anyway. With that said, thank you very much for checking out the video. If you've enjoyed it, you know what to do. Leave a likey and all of that jazz on the video. And I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.